Now we have the fundamentals of the application ready, it's time to take a look at constructing some real UI and how it turns from XAML into the visual layer. So the next step is UI composition. Basically, this is just an explanation of how we turn XAML layouts in code into visuals on screen. So we've got some diagrams here, but the most important one I'd say to start with is this here. So what this is trying to explain is on the right side here is your XAML, and these little drop downs, it's easier to show you in actual code, or these lines here almost. So if we were to collapse each one of these sections, like this for example, now you have a window, which is the first indent, and then this line would take us inwards to design, and this is in the same line, so StackPanel is the first indentation along with design. That is basically similar to main window is here, and then built-in layout in this instance would be our StackPanel here, and technically this would sit at the same level. And then once we go inside of StackPanel, you can see the indentation goes one further, and we have label StackPanel. So you can think of every physical indent in XAML, when it's well formatted, as being a representation like this, one going inside another. So just like a tree view in File Explorer, if you want to browse your files on a machine and you go inside folders, you can think of this almost like folders. So you could almost say the window is the top level, and then inside of the window it contains the design.dataContext and the stack panel, and that's it. And then the stack panel contains the label and another stack panel, but it doesn't contain these inner labels. You wouldn't classify this top level stack panel as containing those as such. They are just nested layers. So that's a fairly simple concept to understand. And then all we're trying to do is show how that represents itself then as a visual element in the UI. Now, it doesn't always flow this simply where you have a main window and then a content, and it just turns from a tree view into a stackable entry in the UI, but it gives you a good visual. The main window is the outside, the content in this case is our stack panel, and then the inner elements here flow in. So that is what we're trying to get you to understand, is the way that XAML is nested in here and how it ends up stacking in the UI. And I don't think the layout beyond understanding that is any more important now. What we want to focus on is more so what can we do in UI? How do we construct the UI and what can we make of it? We start in desktop apps with the window. And you'll soon find out when you come to mobile apps, this turns into a main view, not a window. But don't worry yourself about that for now. Focus on the window. And then we've seen already a stack panel here. So that stacks things, as the name suggests. And if we change the orientation, say we change the orientation here to horizontal, you can see our entire layout here now. If we were to expand the width or the design width so we can see it, everything now stacks horizontally. So you can see we've completely changed the layout by just changing the orientation. Now by default it's vertical, which then stacks that way. But you can see the idea of using a stack panel. But as we come to make UI, you might be asking yourself, well, what is a stack panel? For example, how does it differentiate itself from anything else like a label or this design data context? So it's always good to have a general idea of what we're dealing with. Now, 99% of you are going to be dealing with just built-in controls. And that's the Avalonia provided controls, such as the stack panel. This list, I think, is a little bit deceiving because the name custom controls just refers to controls that are customized. And a user control and a template control are both custom controls. And a built-in control is technically a custom control that ends up being a templated control or sometimes a user control. So it's kind of, all these get intertwined, and I wouldn't worry yourself too much about how they fall and where they fall. But just think as a built-in control is just mentioning what Avalonia have already built. A custom control is just a name for a control that is being customized, which can be a user or a template control. So almost custom controls is just a term. It's not even a thing as such. I wouldn't really say a custom control. I'd use either a user control or a template. And you can see that further down in the documentation, which we'll get to. You can see here, creating custom controls, types of custom controls are user and template. And then basic controls are still really custom controls. So this terminology, custom, just take that with a pinch of salt. Don't get yourself confused between, is it custom, is it built in? Don't worry yourself about that. But what we're looking at are built-in controls, and primarily they are templated. Now, it's a topic we haven't got into yet, But a templated control is the reason we can style these buttons differently, style all the templates inside of Avalonia, and completely change the UI by applying themes or template controls. None of that will help you at this moment until you've dug deeper. So again, this is all an overview of how things are. So let's get into things that actually matter at this stage. We have a logical and a visual tree. And all that means is what we spoke about at the start. The logical tree is the literal XAML going in logical indented order, whereas the visual tree is this right-hand panel here where everything gets laid out. User controls we touched on. We'll dig into those deeper, and there's not really much you need to know other than they are items that you place inside of the UI, and we have many of them. Stack panels, labels, images, panels. And if you just type into Google, Avalonia Playground, I believe, is where we can find these things. And if you're ever interested in looking at what controls are available, just come to the site, and we have here samples. You've got buttons, borders, calendars. This is a good way to browse the built-in controls, and you can get an idea of how to construct them. So this is a really good place to sidestep to if you're interested in what controls you can use. Now, some specific controls have a single element, a single content, but there's a separate group called collection controls, and these are things like panels, dot panels, stack panels, grids, anything that has multiple children. And we can see that in the stack panel. See how the stack panel is allowed 2 items inside, and they naturally just appear. Whereas the window isn't a collection control. This you can ignore. We have a single stack panel. If we try to add a label, just like we do inside of a stack panel, we get this error that basically tells us the property content can't be set more than once. That's because a window is not a collection control. So anytime in the UI, you want to embed multiple items or multiple controls inside of one section, you need a collection control. That's why we have things like stack panels and grids, and they're the most important thing to understand UI. That is all revolved around layout, and I wouldn't mix in understanding collection controls with visuals. Think of them purely as layout elements and how you are going to position other elements that are inside of them. And then once you understand collection controls, all you have to do then is put inside of them custom controls. Pretty much that's how it kind of works. So anything that isn't a collection control, then you put in a regular control. And between collection controls and everything else, I think they're the only 2 real categories. You have the exception of a main window, which is usually a window specifically for desktop applications. And then everything else is either usually a collection control for layout or just another control in the UI. And how that control is made is irrelevant. They're really the only concepts that you care about.